Hello.
Abrupt as ever. One of
We
these
have
days, I'm going to
never
fix that intro so it's smooth.
finessed that intro. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Punch Up Pod with Lila and Pat. We are so happy to be here today in spite of one more atrocity in our midst. And we are super excited to have a guest on today, Stephen Semler. So let's just start, Pat, with our normal, pretend everything's normal. How are you and how was your weekend?
My weekend was fabulous. I got back from Europe, world traveler that I am.
You're so fancy, I know.
And 2 days into being in my apartments, I woke up the other day to fire in my apartment complex. Literally outside my door had a 15-foot flame. And so, yeah, I haven't had hot water in a week. But other than that.
Have you showered?
First off, shout out. Yeah, I have a gym nearby.
Like a sponge bath, just a quick little, like with wipes.
No one can prove I haven't. But yeah, I just want to shout out to landlords. Amazing people. It was great that after 4 days, I called them and said, "What's happening with the hot water? You haven't even let us know." And they put a note on the door saying, "Thankfully, we have cold water, so it's not convenient, but we can boil our water for a bath."
What are you complaining about?
So we have no reason to complain.
Yeah. Do you have a stove? Do you have a microwave?
I have a stove and gas that works. All I got to do is boil like 20 gallons of water.
And keep them hot as you keep running back and forth.
Time.
It feels like a microcosm for the whole state of affairs, actually. Just flames going all over the place, and you're being told to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Just boil some water. This is what this country's coming to. That's going to be the Biden administration at some point. Give it like maybe 2 more years. It'll be like,
yeah,
we know you don't have health care, but there's Benadryl and boiling some water to curate. I don't know, something.
Yeah.
How was your week?
It was better than yours, but it still kind of sucked ass, to tell you the truth. Really hard to just find some silver lining. I'm so grateful for my alcohol and my family and all that good stuff. But holy God, thank God for the alcohol. Because
did you just thank alcohol before your family?
I did.
Maybe just
my
a little tweak to that narrative there.
Yeah. Okay. We got a lot to discuss. We're so excited to have a guest on today to discuss with us. So let's bring Stephen on and welcome him to the party. Hello.
Stephen, great to have you here.
No, thank you. It's good to be here.
So happy to have you here. I was saying right before we came on, I've been following you and retweeting you like a crazy person for, the last couple of years, but I mostly have envisioned you as charts, like amazing charts that break everything down that's wrong with the way we're running our country. But it's so nice to put a face to behind the chart. So hi and welcome.
Hi, and I appreciate the kind words about the charts. I always try to create graphic details that are shareable, that communicate the point across very quickly, and have analysis attached in case anyone's interested. But sometimes the analysis is boring, so I just try to make the charts as colorful as possible.
Well, kudos on both levels. You're doing a good job at that. Why don't you tell us about, you say SPRI or SPRI?
SPRI, the grassroots funded think tank. I launched it a couple years ago. We're still, I mean, it's a couple years old, but we're still sort of in the startup phase, finding our way. It's more of a pet project, but we're looking to essentially change the way knowledge production works in terms of generating U.S. foreign policy ideas, instead of looking at what's in the nation's interest, which is often defined by the 1%, frankly. We're actually probably the 0.001% in the political class.
Right.
Our central goal is to create policies that are good for the working class. So that's the U.S. working class and our working class peers abroad. So that's really the center of our attention. And that's sort of the aim we do for all of our writing. For me personally, in the charts you're talking about, some of it ends up in SPRI research pieces, but I run the Speaking Security newsletter on Substack, which is where the charts come, usually like once, sometimes twice a week, 3 times if something bad happens.
So
or
4
again-
times a week is what you're saying?
You're SOL,
Yeah, so now-
nothing bad happening. So
it's going to be thrice daily soon enough, the trajectory we're on. But
yeah.
yeah, that's about it in terms of content production goes.
Well,
So
it's fantastic, and it's really illustrative of so much of what's happening. So thank you for your work.
Yes. And before I drink too much and forget, where can people find you on both Substack and Twitter?
So you can just search my name, Stephen Semler, all one word, at Stephen Semler, STEPHEN SEMLER. And you can search that in Substack too. But again, the Substack's name is Speaking Security, and the think tank is called Security Policy Reform Institute, or SPRI, where you can find us on Twitter at security_reform. But if you follow me, you'll become a SPRI guy if you identify that way soon enough.
There you go.
I like that. I like that a lot. I don't know, Pat. Should we get into the subjects of the week that we've pulled? There's a lot to discuss, and it all sort of is interrelated as everything is. Are you going to hang out with us, Stephen? And no pressure at all, but are you drinking with us? Are you just watching us make asses of ourselves? Either way is fine.
No, I'm sticking to club soda tonight. I'll be your designated driver.
Okay, thank you. We will need that.
Yeah, the problem is, so I let the caffeine get a little out of control today, and when you're in one of those situations where you've had too much coffee or another stimulant, you try to balance it out with different drugs, and they're sort of arm wrestling. I'm trying to avoid that scenario, so I'm kind of just tapering off.
I do remember college.
That feels like a really mature approach to substances, and mine are all battling it out within me. But we'll see how we each fare during this hour. I have a feeling you're going to come out on top.
Well, cheers to you both, anyways. And it's bad luck to cheers with water, but
please, no. We're thrilled you're here, and we're just going to talk about the goings on of the week. You ready, Pat?
Right.
I told Pat today
Absolutely.
I was going to let him push all the buttons, but I don't know that that's actually true. I might. Hi, Soya. How are you? Yeah,
Soya.
exactly. We got hot water for all who really want it. That's the Pete Buttigieg bread pricing scheme.
Yeah, the backup was that they did also include in the note that I'm mandated to have renter's insurance so I could get an apartment or rent a place or something through my renter's insurance. Anyway, let's spin the wheel before I get too salty.
All right. Okay. What's happening with our transitions? They are so abrupt. I don't have time to move into the next one. What do we have this week? Build Back Biden, the Uncivil War, Monkeypoxalypse. Clever play on words there. Ukraine drain and guns. Let's spin the wheel.
Let's go shop.
Yeah, baby.
Not related to guns.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Well, this is all just so miserable. It really is. It's a lot. It's miserable. And here we find ourselves once again. I told you I wasn't going to push the buttons, and then I pushed the buttons because I'm a control freak. So we all saw what happened yesterday. A gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Deadliest school shooting since Sandy Hook almost 10 years ago. What a horror show, first of all.
Clearly tragic. And the thing is, people think Democrats are going to save us somehow, and Democrats are not actively working to save us, is the narrative. I mean, that I want to get out there. They've had so many opportunities over the years to do something about guns, and they just want to keep it an election issue. Is the whole thing. Guns and abortion are the two things they're gonna not do anything about forever and campaign on forever
and fundraise off of.
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, what's your feeling, Steven? I mean, it's like bleak. We're going to start with the bleak one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, terribly sad and kind of nauseating as well, because it's so horrific. One thing, I mean, going off Pat's point, I mean, the Democrats not saving us. They refused to, change police in a fundamental way. And it's clear that police did not help in this situation. I mean, eventually when, the special forces were called, but they engaged the shooter outside the school, somehow allowed him to get in the premises, and to my knowledge did not start pulling kids out until the shooter was deceased, wasting valuable time. But it's good to get affirmation. Teachers are heroes, especially when you're dealing with kids those ages. And it's clear that the teachers were more prepared to put their life on the line for the kids than the police were. And the police are just, it goes back to, this is an element of militarization of police, where the police are trained by military units to preserve the units or personal officer safety or soldier safety above all else. So that means accepting casualties that aren't you or in your unit. Teachers are not trained that way. They're trained to be loving, unselfish people. And I think we saw that play out, but just dreadful. And, almost, it's one of those tragedies where you just find it hard to look at your phone. And then you take a peek real fast and you're like, all right, I just got to do it, brave through this. But my heart goes out.
I mean, really it's just so horrifying. And then to see Democrats say to blame it all on Republicans, which of course, like, I know Republicans are the enemy. I get it. They are. But the presidency, the House and the Senate, and why aren't we talking about eliminating the filibuster right away and doing something, which I don't even know, honestly, what we would be legislating right now for gun reform. Because there's a lot that could be legislated, but I think that this kid did have a background check. He bought those guns legally. I don't know that any of the laws, even if they had been enforced, I don't know that would have prevented this, which doesn't mean that we shouldn't enact more laws. But I think the problem is, like every other thing, the Democrats love to use this as a wedge issue, and Republicans, of course, love it also. But there are so many bigger issues at play here that we are the only country that keeps having these mass shootings. And I don't think it's only because we have the most guns, which we do, but we're also, every time they show that chart of all of the countries that don't have our problems and don't have our guns, they also have universal health care. Wow. Sorry, in the middle of my
just saw Toadman emerge.
Interrupted. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I don't even understand how he pressed enter on this one. Matt Iglesias yesterday feels like he has to write about why the United States is so fantastic while we are still IDing 21 bodies, and what that is, it's like a call for unity. It's a call for tone policing. It's a call to, hey, just like, don't protest outside of people's homes. It's like what the establishment, as you said about the police protecting property and the 1% or the 0.01% or whatever, like that's his call to everybody, just calm it down. Just vote. Vote in November.
It all comes down to elect more Democrats. That's the whole game. You got, and Fred Gutenberg lost his son in the Sandy Hook tragedy. Daughter, excuse me. And it's awful, but the idea that you're just going to elect Democrats to solve this problem is not in any shape addressing this problem. You got Schumer right now. He's saying Americans can make a choice. Americans can cast their vote in November based on how they stand on guns. So how you feel about this tragedy is going to be how you should vote somehow. Like those are hand in hand together. One word, vote.
Do they know who's the president right now? Like I don't
We delivered them
understand.
the trifecta. They lied about the $2,000 checks to get the trifecta. And the only way that we'd possibly forgive them is if they actually make good policy, and they haven't. So
not a
that's what he
single
wants to do.
campaign promise, not the $15 minimum wage, not the stupid public option, not the canceling student debt, not legalizing marijuana, not, listening to the science on COVID or fossil fuels. They have done nothing. And now we're supposed to just vote in 6 months. Like, it's just a crazy, I don't know how many people are still falling for that.
No, I think the Democratic Party now, not now, now and, for the last several years, perhaps decades, has just come across as, well, I guess especially since Biden's been elected, it's come across as just almost a business. It's like its job is to perpetuate itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you in school, I studied it, imperialism, mostly by the US. And, empire, the goal is to sustain itself. At the end of the day, you can get lost in complexity, but at the end of the day, empire is there to sustain itself. And that's what the Democratic Party, I would liken the Democratic Party to. How could you not? It's not interested in, becoming a better version of itself or reforming itself. It's there to just make money and keep the donations going and having a weird back and forth with Republicans. And then they can hug it out occasionally when one of them finally eats it, like John McCain.
And the Republicans being worse just enables the Democrats to be even more to the right, essentially, which is what their donors all want. They want they want no changes to policy that will impact their bottom line dollars. And
and people talk about like how, sorry, go ahead.
No, but the gun shooting, it's associated with the NRA, guns are Republicans, so they think they can use this and leverage this to make the Republicans worse, which they will do. Pox on the Republicans' house for being so in bed with the NRA, but the Democrats are in bed with the NRA too. They have been for decades.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things is like, I don't know the answer to the gun violence problem. Like Lila said, it's more than supply, but if I've read some studies where supply does play a role.
Sure.
But it's always, amalgamation like that. But if it, I don't know if it plays a big enough role to do this, but if Biden wanted, he could nationalize weapons manufacturers. And even, giant tech bros in Silicon Valley, they could buy these firms. Remington, I think went bankrupt, several times within the last decade.
Right.
These firearm firms aren't really worth that much. They're not, they're involved with military contractors, but the military contractors that make high value weapons like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon for the weapons that are going to Ukraine, those are really high value companies. But the firearm companies, they're really not that worth that much. So Biden could nationalize them. Like the millionaires in Congress, the Democrat millionaires in Congress could probably afford to buy some of these countries and shut them down. And the fact that they're not even, putting that on the table is just kind of shows how unserious they are.
They are completely unserious about all of this. And, I also think our forever wars have to feed into the mentality, like more, video games. I don't believe that, but I think that sending our people out, like we've been at war my whole life, one place or another. And that's families that are destroyed in our country. It's those people going off and destroying families in other countries. That's just the perpetuation of that mindset, the good versus evil, that feeling of like having to be victorious in this violent way. And we're seeing it play out. I know we'll talk about Ukraine, but there's no room for negotiation. There's no room for diplomacy. We just have to fight to the death. And I think that sort of like a superhero fairy tale fixation is also part of, I think mostly the pain is that we have created a society where our government does not help take care of its people on any level, not to ensure that you only can work one job, not to ensure that you have healthcare, that you drink clean water, breathe clean air, that you haven't broken up a family for a small drug possession and somebody's in jail for, we have told everybody, pull yourself up from your bootstrap. You're on your own. We saw it with COVID. We've buried 1 million people in our country. There is no part of our government has shown itself to care one iota for the welfare of its people.
Well, the only proven way out of extreme poverty from our country is to join the military. I mean, the military can pay for a lot of your bills, and that has to affect the psyche of a lot of these states where they're so poor and they have no solution. And you see people join the military, and the military, they go to college and they make something of their lives, and So I mean, just on the psychological level, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at not just in the United States, but countries across the world who have adopted neoliberal structural adjustment or had it forced upon them in certain ways, always a decline in social services. Everyone knows that, but there's always an uptick in military spending, or almost always. So it shows it's like, it's the only, I think the lowest form of politics is the position that Republicans have, is that the only acceptable role of government is to provide, military protection. Not protection for the nation per se, not for the people in it, I should say, but from a certain version of security threat, outside actors, or leftists inside, to armed oppression,
homegrown terrorists.
Yeah, broadly defined. So it's really just a low form of politics, neoliberalism is, because it shuts out all the stuff that makes for the good life. And is worth fighting for, and requires a political fight, and just goes with the stuff that the elites can agree over, bang, pass it, and move on.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, yes, it is the Republican stance, but it's clearly also a majority of, there wasn't a single Democrat who voted against the $42 billion that we just sent to Ukraine, in addition to the enormous military budget that I think was even, $60 billion beyond Trump's. I mean, it never ends. I think Biden's just really getting a free pass in a way that Trump at least got some pushback, but all the Democrats just lined up right behind all that spending to go to, the Pentagon and defense spending.
That's actually what I worry about regarding that, and not just for that vote, but for the impending vote on the military budget, which will either be Biden proposed $813.4 billion, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Aside from the surge in Afghanistan between 2009 and 2011, Biden's budget request, adjusted for inflation, would be the highest since World War II. He's the first president where there hasn't been a peace dividend following the end of a war. They've never been, the post-Cold War peace dividend, for example, that was a minor drop. And nowhere near as big as it should have been. There was a slight drop after the end of the Iraq War, or the first end of the Iraq War, and across time from Vietnam to the Gulf War, etc. But they've never been as big as they have been, in the hope that when Biden withdrew troops from Afghanistan, that we'd actually see and benefit from a real peace dividend. And I'm not arguing that these did I say defense spending?
No, I think somebody else is just saying that. No. I think everyone's supporting.
But I agree with that, with actually being a stickler about defense versus military spending.
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of lost the thread, but caffeine.
But, it's okay. It's all. Go ahead.
But when we left Afghanistan, it was obvious to a lot of people that we would find another avenue immediately to justify all that spending. And I mean, in record time, we're in this huge war in Ukraine. We're going back to Africa. We're talking shit to China now. I mean, it's just, they will always.
Our people are in absolute desperation. I mean, we are throwing money, and you had a great, should I do this or should we spin the wheel? You had a great post today that I'm going to find with your graphic here.
Save it.
No,
Ukraine.
wait. All right. Save it. All right.
I mean,
I'm not pushing the buttons, Pat. I'm not pushing the buttons. Spin the wheel. Go.
Well, we have Ukraine on the wheel, so I don't want to jack that, but we'll make sure we land on that part.
All right.
So let's move on.
Shot. Oh, no. Okay, go ahead.
This is cool.
Yeah, baby.
Thank you. I need this today.
Yeah, we had to leave that gun talk because, goddamn, it's awful.
It's really depressing.
Sure.
Pat, as close as we are and as much as we talk, I'm a little surprised that you didn't notice I'm not drinking my diet tonic today. I switched to Crystal Light lemonade with my vodka. It's a new me.
I feel bad that I didn't notice that, but I would not
It's the
notice
little
that
things.
ever. It's cheers. I already did my shot, but
you did your shot without me again?
Yeah, I couldn't wait. I'm sorry.
Disrespect. All right.
I've already poured my next shot.
Okay.
I'm
ready.
Yeah, baby.
Oh, hell yeah.
How you do the work.
Look at this. This is why it's worth tuning in once a week to find
and
some
slowly,
joy.
Lila is teaching me manners. I'm going to wait for you this time, Lila.
Thanks, Pat.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, everybody. Oh God. Okay, the thoughts are going to come so much faster now. Let's go.
I feel like I'm just watching, a self experiment unfold.
You could just call it a train wreck. You can call it a train wreck.
No, I'm really digging these vibes.
There we go.
Well, the good news is Biden's poll numbers are, what's that? Have you ever seen, I'm not pushing buttons, Pat, go, because we'll just keep polling on top of each other. Show us where Biden's polls are right now.
Let's do a quick run through. Very quick. I won't hit them all, but AP, can you read that? I can't read that.
Yeah. President Joe Biden's approval rating dipped to the lowest point of his presidency in May, with deepening pessimism emerging among members of his own Democratic Party.
Right. So that's just the AP poll. And then you can move on to NBC. NBC News poll shows Joe Biden crashing to his lowest mark of his presidency. 75% of people think the country is on the wrong track. 75%. It's pretty bad. But let's look at some other polls. This is AP.
That's better because look, 2 and 10. Oh, no, that's worse. That's worse. Okay. See my math? I got my math. All right.
You're begging for my misogyny to come out. Don't tempt my misogyny.
No, I'm actually good at math. I just can't. I'm not on 3 shots in 20 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
PBS, 69% say economy is bad. 65% say Biden is slow to react when issues arrive. 63 describe state of the country as uneasy and worrying. Not good, but it's just an outlier if you're a representative for the Democratic Party. Quinnipiac.
I thought demographics are destiny, I thought. Just lie back and enjoy the new demographics.
So, Rasmussen, 69% of his voters think the U.S. is on the wrong track, highest in Biden's term. Only 19% of voters strongly approve of the job Joe Biden is doing. And I think we have one more poll.
That's pretty good.
Routers
That's
Ipsos.
pretty good for Biden.
Oh, 36% approve of Biden in this poll. This might be one of his top polls.
That's higher than 25 and even higher than 20%. I'm fine. I'm doing the math now. Why are his numbers so low?
Well, immediately Ron Klein comes out, who is the chief of staff.
Klein.
And says, Klein.
Yeah. Go ahead with your sexist jokes, Pat. Keep them coming at me.
Hey, that was Klein. That could be anti-Semitic too. I mean, I could hit all the.
Yeah, it's actually good news. This is actually good news because on the 2 areas that he inherited from Trump, COVID and jobs, where he kicked how many millions of people off unemployment benefits, Biden did. So now we have much better unemployment. And COVID, nobody gives a shit anymore because they can't put food on a table. And because the administration has worked overtime to tell people that COVID's over, in spite of, I know we're going to get to this, but the fact that we're spiking all over the country. Good news.
Yes. And just to wrap it up, I mean, somebody responded back that even the poll that claimed, the one poll that showed a 2% uptick in Biden's approval rating also showed that 69% think the economy is bad, 70% disapprove his inflation handling, 81% think Biden doesn't care a lot, 81% think Biden doesn't care a lot.
I mean, that was the whole thing that got him elected, I thought, was that he was
the most damning of them all,
yeah,
in a way.
Yeah, because he has nothing in terms of his track record. I mean, he's a shitty politician. He's been a shitty politician his whole life.
I mean, I can't tell it.
Whoa.
No, but real quick, I just want to show none of this is an outlier. Like these are his approval ratings from the time he took office. They have gone into the shitter and they continue to go into the shitter. So, yeah.
So,
Steve,
is the dominant so I saw like the economy pop up pretty much on every one. Is that the dominant? I mean, first off, that was a really impressive collection that you guys put together for those poll numbers. That was kind of fun watching this scroll through. But is there any theory in terms of the moment that public opinion sort of went like that?
Well,
or any specific reason? Was the collapse of his Build Back Better, or him?
I think it started with the collapse of the Build Back Better, right? Which they, when Pat, what are you doing? You don't.
Well, no, I'm just showing.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm showing that 69% of the people polled say the economy is bad. So the biggest determinant in that, to me, across all those polls, is the economy. I mean, people vote on their
$2,000. Well, it started with the $2,000, and it's only gotten worse, right? I mean, when they separated Build Back Better from the infrastructure package, and then even the small, policy points that they had made concessions on everything across Build Back Better, but even that would have been better than doing nothing. And then he hasn't done a single thing. They keep trying different messaging, and now it's for a while it was the fact that they had put so much money, they'd flooded the economy with those stimulus checks, right? Which was complete BS. And then they tried a few different things, blaming progressives, and then it became Putin's price hikes. Now I think they're just calling it ultra MAGA. Like they don't have a through line for exactly. I mean,
so if you look at this chart, I mean, inflation was jacking up like crazy before the Putin alleged price hike. So I mean, it's just one example.
It's all
Putin apologist now.
Yeah,
that's exactly, that's right. That's where it's all going to go. Like it's all progressives' fault. We've tried too much. We tried the progressive way, and that's why Biden isn't popular. So progressives are going to have to get in line and, pull up your big boy pants and vote for Biden so we don't get Trump. Meanwhile, Biden's doing everything possible to ensure that we get Trump in November, or DeSantis, or whoever the hell.
What drives me crazy, Lila, you brought up the stimulus checks about how Biden, like at the first sniff of inflation, he threw the stimulus checks under the bus immediately, saying that was the reason. It's like, dude, you just proposed a military budget that's literally twice the cost of those stimulus checks. And I don't think government spending was the problem, especially because government spending, I think, is needed to resolve, the supply chain issues that are causing inflation, federal regulation over concentration of companies and CEO greed is needed. But he goes after the one fucking thing that actually helps consumers deal with the rise in inflation until the government can act theoretically to bring it down.
The number one thing he's not lying about is that they're cutting inflation during a fucking pandemic. I mean, that just kills me. That is like
the deficit, right?
The deficit, cutting the deficit amidst a pandemic. I mean, spend. You should be out there trying to justify why you spent on all these programs.
I mean, what are we defending? Yeah.
Every time Biden talks about cutting the deficit, it's nothing that he did. It's nothing that is a policy and that he engineered that brought down deficit spending in a creative way. He just let COVID funding expire. The COVID funding was dispersed in 2020 and 2021, and he didn't bother trying to renew the program. So just letting things, just die off.
And then told people to spend their surplus on cops. The surplus
this-
of those COVID programs, he told cities you should spend it on your police forces.
Yes. So there's a portion of these funds obviously went to states, and now Biden is telling them just to flush it and give it to police. I really worry that there's been a shift in Biden's narrative. Like, I don't remember the last time he mentioned Build Back Better. Obviously it was kind of dead before that. I mean,
right.
he cut his infrastructure bill down over 75% to appease Republicans.
Yep.
And down to just where it's basically just does a tiny bit. It's like $500 billion over 5 years, which is nothing for infrastructure. And worse yet, I mean, most of it was basically bribes, so Manchin would support it instead of him to support it. So once they kicked it off, dumped all the social provisions out, they lost all their leverage to get particularly shitty Dems and Republicans to vote for it. So to get the social provisions through Congress. Yeah. And now, like, Biden's bragging about, cutting the deficit by letting social funding expire. He's literally going to Lockheed Martin facilities and talking about to basically pimp his Ukraine package and stump for it. He should be in if he actually cared about social spending, he should be in West Virginia.
That's right.
So I really worry, the direction we're on, and I worry that we haven't heard acknowledgement from the Progressive Caucus or any Democrat saying, okay, look, it's clear that Biden has changed. He's not singing the same tune that he was to get elected, where the Sunrise Movement kids and others were out there getting the vote for him, which is fine. I don't hate them for that, but there needs to be a plan to replace it because it's clear that Biden has changed. So we need a plan to respond to the changes that Biden himself has decided.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. The silence is,
Well, my biggest beef with the squad per se and progressives in Congress is the immediacy of COVID relief in COVID protections. It's now, and they're not pushing back on this administration on any level on any COVID protections whatsoever. I have never seen them come out. I mean, they'll push for Medicare for all and say Medicare for all right now that's a tweet. I mean,
it's a tweet that only started happening in the pathway as we're going towards the midterms, because they did not talk about Medicare for all for the first year and a half of the Biden administration.
But the CDC changing their reporting guidelines and all this nonsense going on, and the fact that we're not pushing for air purification systems or these simple things that are obvious. The most basic mitigations tells me that I'm not a fraud squatter. I don't hate them. I think they're progressives and they're trying, but strategically how are you going to convince the public you're helping them when most of the public sees the need for these things and you're not even fighting for these things?
Yeah.
I really respect the hell out of the scientists who created the People CDC. Have you seen that?
Yes.
They just seem like the loveliest. Yeah. They seem like the loveliest, the most loving people, and people you definitely don't want pissed off at you, because they're fierce. They come at you in a very sharp and witty way. It's really, really impressive. I love the work they're doing. But I echo the disappointment in terms of even on a smaller level, just in ensuring that we have enough funding for vaccines for the next variant. Biden laid out a plan. They knew the White House was running out of money for emergency COVID relief for these next variants. This is for masks, this is for testing, for his vaccines, really, really basic stuff.
Yeah.
And really not a whole lot of money. Biden laid out a plan for $22 billion or $22.5 billion. He requested it in time at the same time as the first Ukraine aid bill. Nancy Pelosi stripped the COVID funding from the Ukraine aid bill, even though, again,
and by that point, I think they had whittled it down to $10 billion, by the way.
Yeah, they cut it in half or something like that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So they cut it down, and then Nancy Pelosi finally just fuck it, threw it out and passed the Ukraine aid only.
Really
and that's
important.
The same exact thing just happened for this second Ukraine aid bill. That's even bigger. Except Biden is the one who ordered the COVID funding be stripped out so he could expedite aid to Ukraine. It's like, dude, it's how do you even take it seriously at that point? And I'm sure Democrats were under pressure to
well,
fall
apparently
in
Mitch
line. But
McConnell asked him to. I mean, that was
No
the
way.
headline. So Mitch McConnell gets the headline of, I think we have it under our COVID thing because we got to spin that wheel and get to there. But yeah, apparently Mitch McConnell was the one who said, listen, we're not going to be able to pass that money to Ukraine, which, I think a lot of good-hearted or heavily propagandized liberals think that money goes to Ukraine. But that money, for the most part, goes to defense contractors, right?
We
Just
really
to line
need
their
to get
pocket.
to Ukraine to show
I
that
know.
because
But
the
like,
work you did is like really amazing.
Yeah.
On that.
All right.
No, thank
Let's
you.
spin the
Thank you.
wheel. Let's spin the wheel so everything
you-
happens in an orderly way. Is that what you're telling me? Go
Lila,
ahead.
I was not trying to quiet you.
No, it's
Or
my
was
fault
that?
for bypassing the wheel.
No.
The
Like
wheel.
every time I've been
all
dragging
holy
the
wheel.
conversation.
We
into
got a
other things,
plan
so-
here.
No.
Yeah, baby.
Okay.
Wheel.
Favorite hour of the week has got to be when we land on the shots for the wheel. I got you.
Oh,
Pat, just
I was
wait,
about to
I'm
take
coming.
a chug out of this.
I mean, I
Jeez.
can't believe it. All right.
What are you guys drinking?
Cheers.
Thank you for asking. Cheers. I'm drinking vodka and diet lemonade.
A bourbon dual barrel collection heritage. I don't know. It's a bourbon. It's tasty though.
Nice.
I've numbed my mouth.
So many jokes. to
Yeah, we
that.
definitely do. It's always prom night here.
God damn it.
Shay, Punch Up Pod. Yes.
All right, I'm gonna
hail
spin the
our
wheel
real
before
Lord.
I
All right.
say something
Yeah.
sexist, misogynist, transphobic.
Yeah, baby.
Who knows where I could go?
No way. No way. Shut
right.
the front door.
All right,
Good
let's
thing
speed it up so we can get
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
politics.
yeah. Let's go. All right. I got it. You
I'm
don't even have to
really-
wait for me. I'm coming.
I would be on
Alright,
the
go.
floor by now, I think.
I'm a mess. I need your caffeine. Ugh. Okay.
Yeah, baby.
We have like only one shot on the wheel. We're not going to get to that one. Come on. There it is.
There we go. Ukraine drain. Let's start off with this brilliant graphic prepared by our very own Stephen Semler. But wait, we've got to figure out a way to do this better. All right. Do you know the graph to which we're referring? Because I don't want to put it up there and block your face, and we're having a problem
All right.
with our layout here.
I was trying the layout. No, but it's a
It's a StreamYard issue.
There's no good way to do
I
it.
could try to switch.
Wait a minute.
myself.
No,
Yeah.
here.
Oh, God, that's very kind of you, but
On the
It was
screen,
a
the
complete
right way.
fail. All right,
Complete
let's just
fail.
go.
Do you know what? If we took it down, can you sort of talk about it, knowing what
Well-
we're referring to, Stephen?
no, I think the audience has seen enough of my face, but I can do it
Okay,
basically
alright.
from memory. That chart took fucking forever. It
I can
really did.
imagine.
Yeah. But
All
you
right,
know,
I'm taking it down while you tell us about that chart. So, what was the point of the chart? What are you showing, and what's the point of it?
the point is what you identified. It's, aid or assistance. It sounds good. Even, military aid. If people are committed enough to the cause, they think it's inconsequential or even good or appropriate, whatever. But aid generally sounds good. But when we talk about military aid and economic aid and humanitarian aid, a lot of it is cycled off into contractors. So when we talk, so I zoomed in on military aid in particular. And I just wanted to make it clear that when we talk about military aid, what we're really talking about is funneling money to the Pentagon, who either spends it on itself for its own operations or sends it to military contractors. Now, just because money goes to military contractors doesn't mean it's not military aid. But I wanted to just kind of flesh out to see who the main winners were from this bill. And I see no reason why military contractors won't be getting the most, won't be the biggest winners financially. There's only one bilateral military aid program that's worth $6 billion. So it's just one of these things. And, the amount that I estimated for military contractors, of this so-called aid being funneled to military contractors is that it's over 17 billion. Very conservative estimate on my end. Just because I don't know, I didn't want to, go too far, but I see that it would probably definitely be more than that. That's more than the total humanitarian or economic aid in the bill itself, which may or may not go to Ukraine. There's stipulations for other countries to be included in there as well. And there's a lot that goes to operating costs and overhead. But basically the point was just to show where the money's going and who the main winner is. And you could still say that, I'm fine with this redistribution of wealth because I believe enough in what the bill does politically as a political outcome. But I don't think from burden of proof standpoint, I don't think there's enough there. There's enough guarantee that this bill and what it does, which is send a ton of money and weapons to Ukraine, is done in service of a strategy. It seems now, it's become increasingly more apparent that the U.S. is adopting not a strategy that's based on just ending the conflict and ending it as soon as possible in a diplomatic way, is that it's now sort of cynically prolonging the conflict to inflict punitive damage on Russia.
But don't you feel like that was from the start? That was the only strategy that they had? Everyone essentially knew there's no way that we could stop Russia. And the better you do in a ground war with Russia, the more you just get bombed by Russia. So even all these arms that might help Ukrainians for a short term is leading to their demise in a sense. I think if the American public knew how dire the situation is and the realities of war with Russia, would they really support all of this spending in lieu of the potential, like ending homelessness in America or something?
Right. And in either case, we're not hearing from working class people. We're hearing from Zelensky and Ukrainian leadership and spokespeople, and we're hearing from U.S. leadership and spokespeople. Yeah. Now, I think the public is broadly supportive of the U.S. quote unquote doing something, but to your point, I don't think they're fully aware of the results of their good intentions. And I do believe that, flooding the country with arms will prolong the conflict. And it's the same problem with, when they're calling for no-fly zones. I'm sure people are still calling for no-fly zones.
Right.
That would, obviously involve shooting down Russian aircraft and bombing Russian airfields. But even if it was successfully implemented and we avoided World War III or nuclear exchange somehow by some miracle, Russia still has artillery. And they could use that long-range artillery to just bypass the conflict zone. They could scale up their invasion to kill people on the ground. This has been always the case with no-fly zones, like in northern Iraq in the 90s, for a brief period in Libya.
It does seem that the whole point of this is to prolong this and to bleed Russia dry. And I think, we keep getting these sort of, well, first of all, there's so much censorship and we're only seeing one side, and there's a lot of propaganda against Russia, which is, what their invasion is a war crime. I'm not a tanky. I'm not a proponent of Putin. However, I do think that the lack of information that we're getting, you're talking about evacuating the military, the Azov militants in Mariupol, instead of saying it was a surrender, right? Like everything's being framed in a certain way to give people here hope and to prolong this effort.
Right.
Go ahead, Pat.
I just totally cut you off. I'm not going to do it. I refuse.
No, you got something important to say.
I just want to say, I was listening. Oh, cut you off again. One more time. Try it.
We're like an old married couple. Yeah, go ahead.
Just try to say something, Lila.
No, forget it. I'm gonna mute you now.
I was listening to NPR, and NPR had on discussing the war, and so they had on a spokesperson from Ukraine, and no one else, just the interviewer and this person from Ukraine, and they were asking her, "Is it good that Russia just defeated they just took over the factory in Mariupol?" And she's like, "Yes, because it delayed Russia." So there was it delayed Russia's
Advance in other parts of the territory or something.
Thank
like
you
that.
for completing my thought, because I don't have a thought. But yes, but basically it was propaganda. It's one person on NPR asking one view, Ukraine's view on what the outcome politically is, that they lost a factory in Russia, and the outcome for
and a whole town. Yeah.
But for people listening to that story, they're like, yes, we keep right. slowing them down.
Yeah.
Keep slowing them down was the whole point of the whole, that was the pitch.
Yeah.
And slowing them down doesn't mean we're winning. Like, Ukraine is not winning. They're not even remotely winning this. They're losing this handedly. Like,
that's
and every time, sorry, go ahead.
Lila.
Well, thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
No, but every time Zelensky has said we need a diplomatic end to this, we need, he was elected on the mission of bringing peace to that region, and then he was threatened by the Nazis in the Azov party and the right sector, I think, said that he'll be lynched if he tries to negotiate with Russia. And every time, and even, the US, and they sent Boris Johnson over there basically to say, you don't get to negotiate. You do not have the sanction of the US and UK to negotiate peace with Russia. It's very clear that that's not what that the US and the UK are interested in, a negotiated peace.
It is weird too, because the US, on repeated occasions, either in the press room or whatever, U.S. has been asked about its role in brokering or somehow being involved in a negotiated settlement to end the conflict. And the latest was Secretary of State Anthony Blinken in the Senate during a hearing. He was saying that, we're not going to pretend we're more Ukrainian than Ukrainian, essentially saying the U.S. has no role in this. It's just up to Ukraine to take care of it, which, as you mentioned, kind of flies in the face of previous statements and actions.
Right.
But the disturbing thing is that the U.S. is sending. The U.S. is officially now the largest stakeholder of the Ukrainian army, just because of the billions it has sent in, the billions in economic aid, and it also has its finger on the control of a crippling sanctions regime that hasn't brought down the value of the Russian currency, but it has really devastated the Russian economy in terms of real life impact.
Yeah.
And the U.S. is denying that it has a role. Of course, the U.S. has a role. I mean, it has its finger on the switch of both of those things.
Right.
That will be part of any negotiated settlement. Russia will demand a stop to both of those things.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I don't see what the U.S. is really after at this point. One thing that I'll mention is just that's of additional concern in terms of just the endless. It's really an endless war at this point in terms of just the lack of strategy and just fighting for the sake of fighting. But I worry that the war has taken over the soul of the Democratic Party, and that's what they're trying to campaign and win on. They'll mention the infrastructure bill, but if you look at the discourse of the Democratic Party, they're really leaning into this democracy versus autocracy, that this is the fight for global leadership. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? The Russian military budget is half the amount that the US spends on state and local police each year. Yes, they have nukes, but several countries do.
Right.
And if you want to deal with that, you have to do it diplomatically. The US and Russia has made progress in the past on these grounds. So I don't really, I worry that this conflict is now, becoming just the central thing that Democrats care about. And, it appears they really are having fun, talking about it and beating their chest about it. And as a result, the Republicans have, all the Republican votes against the Ukraine, or all the votes against the Ukraine aid bill came from Republicans.
Right.
None from, as you mentioned, Democrats
or
or whatever. And if once those votes came in the Senate, because it passed the House 2 weeks ago with, I think 57 Republican votes opposing and 0 Democrats. And then the Senate, it was 11 Republicans opposing the next week with 0 opposing. And once I saw those votes come in, I thought I heard, kind of a faint moan moaning sound, and presumably it was Glenn Greenwald from his house in Rio de Janeiro moaning in arousal at the thought of a new Substack post showing just how fucking bad progressives are and how great Republicans are. So just one sort of.
I mean, the world is upside down on that, right? And also, cynically, to start a war, to encourage a war and be a wartime president and hope for a boost in polls. And I think only Biden, even George W. Bush got a boost in polls for lying us into war in Iraq. Biden is plummeting because I think it's too desperate here in this country. People are not functioning at any sort of level to justify us sending billions of dollars to another country. I actually retweeted something thinking, I think Rebecca Parson, who's running up in Washington, had tweeted it. And I think she didn't even realize it was an Onion column. And then I retweeted her, not realizing it was from the Onion, because everything's so outlandishly preposterous now. But it was like, sending money to Ukraine for free public college. And it feels like, that we could be doing that. I could see it, because everywhere else we send money to, whether it's Israel or Ukraine or whatever, it has their society is being sort of held together in a way that we're not even attempting to do in our own space.
I think that's where Democrats are losing their ass. They think it's all messaging, but it's not messaging, because people are very aware of their own dire situations. And if it's not their own personal situation, they're very aware of people that have COVID, long COVID, dealing with all sorts of, they have kids in school. There are so many different issues affecting everyday Americans, to where lying about how good the economy is doing and how important Ukraine is doing. Like, the more you send money to Ukraine, even if people are all like blue and yellow flagging their whole profiles, and they still are like, can you do something for us? And then it's just one thing after another, where they see the president has the power to do these things and is not taking the basic actions. So, like, Stephen, you brought up the police. For fuck's sake, today he signed an executive order, which is great. It was a kind of a big deal. It's a national no choke policy, no knock warrants, things like that. It's great, but it's not enough. Those are the issues that don't affect the economy.
Yeah,
they don't. They affect. Those are like abstract sort of issues that aren't financially connected to anything. So he's doing some of that stuff, but I'm just saying, I just want to add, but he's not releasing people from prison for marijuana violations, So like, these are things like the things that are economically tied, because that would affect private prisons that fund Democratic Party. It would, so they will do these little show things that it's something the Republicans won't do. It's better than the Republicans, but that's all they're going to have at the end of the day, is better than Republicans, not the things he should do. But sorry, I'm ranting, but doing the things, you need to appeal to your base by doing things that motivate your base to show up and vote. Yeah. And as much as
Get Out versus Mississippi Burning, and those are our two choices, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much where we are. The Kente cloth, and it's like, okay, the no chokeholds, of course, but like, I think it was already illegal to do chokeholds. So like, okay, that's not. We're just tinkering around the edges to write it on a chart and say, vote for us and send us money in November.
Yeah, and so I work with advocacy groups as a subject matter expert for the Pentagon's 1033 program, which is a grant program that was developed in the war on drugs, has expanded since then through the war on terror, for border security, etc. Anyway, it started during the war on drugs, and what it does is that it allows the Pentagon to send excess or surplus military gear to police for free.
Sorry, did you say that started under Obama? Or did you already say that?
It did spike under Obama, but it started during the war on drugs.
In the 90s.
Yep. There was a pilot program authorized by a bill in 1990. And then in 1997, it was sort of a pilot program. It wasn't designed to be a permanent authority, but it lasted 7 years. And then Bill Clinton in 1997 signed it into law, establishing it as a permanent authority. And from there, it took hold, and especially during the War on Terror, when a lot of military equipment was War on Terror last 20 years.
Right.
A lot of military equipment was flowing back from Iraq and Afghanistan, you saw a huge surge.
Okay.
And there should have been due diligence by the Obama-Biden White House, as Biden is so, inclined to say, to prevent, precipitous, windfall of military equipment and going from, Baghdad to, Memphis or wherever.
Streets, right.
So, going back to the executive order Biden just released, first off, I don't think it actually affects any change or prevents anything, or implements any new standards. I think it just says orders agencies to study the possibility of a certain number and certain
studies.
type.
Get a study together.
Probably.
But even if it turns out to be, sorry, Pat, even if it turns out to be, exactly all the stuff that's listed in the executive order ends up being banned, it's still not enough. And there's still sort of a question of whether, Biden can order all of the equipment that is out, that has been sent out through this program, back with an executive order, because technically through this program, this is a bit inside baseball here, but it's a loan program. It's not a sales program. So the police never own the weapons or tanks or whatever. They're owned by the Pentagon, regardless of how long they've been in police custody. So Biden can, take it all back by executive order. So if he's just, kind of ordering a study and not even including all the equipment that's needed, or that has gone out, then what is he trying to do exactly? It's a performance. It's not,
window dressing once again.
That's what it is.
It's window dressing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what we've seen the biggest increase in spending both for the military and for the police under Biden, who came in, I think, after, the biggest mass movement in U.S. history, I think, is where the George Floyd protests. And now we're funneling more money. Yeah.
But BLM sport was at its highest at that point, and now it's at its lowest.
How's Me Too movement doing? I mean, seriously, every movement, it's where they've all died. We don't even talk about it anymore. We don't talk about BLM. We don't talk about, they're going to blame every loss on defund the police. And there was one person who ran on defund the police and she won, Cori Bush. So it's a lie. It's all just a big lie.
One thing the Democratic Party is good at is obviously punching left very hard, in actionable ways, not just for, killing off candidates, but actually for destroying policies and movements. It's a real shame. I think the Me Too movement was, definitely going to be, killed off by the next Democratic president. I mean, Biden is obviously a groomer. Additionally, I believe Tara Reid too. But I mean, Democrats, I could tell Democrats were going to be touch and go on that. I'm surprised that the BLM, or I guess the George Floyd protest didn't coalesce until something was delivered. Because this is the first time Biden's delivered, or I guess the second time Biden has delivered an EO on police reform. But it's window dressing. It's cosmetic. It's nothing that's actionable. It's nothing that changes the redistribution of wealth.
It's less than he campaigned on, by a mile, and he can do what he campaigned on with an executive order. So I don't know how you run on that. I mean, the Republicans aren't going to run against it. They're not going. So that's how you run on. I guess we're less.
You give more money, so you take away their
It's clear to me that I initially said it as a joke. I'm probably not the first person to think about this or say this at all, but I really think engendering cynicism amongst the masses is the Democrats' primary ruling class strategy. I really think that. I think the Republicans are fighting some sort of religious war.
They're not gerrymandering or voter suppression in the same way, but they are completely disenfranchising everybody under 30, everybody who's from a marginalized community. I mean, they work in tandem to make people just not want to show up to the polls anymore.
Yeah. And especially this is a traumatized society, and, a million of us are gone from a disease that, as you said earlier, the Biden administration is effectively denying. putting,
Yeah.
pandemic denialism alongside its,
Yeah.
de facto climate denial.
Yeah.
I have a, just speaking of which, I'm just going to, pimp my own brand for a bit.
Yeah. Tell us.
Do it.
I've got a paper coming out
Spry.
that looks at the greenhouse gas emissions caused by the military industrial complex each year.
Yep.
And it puts it next side in a chart, obviously. I try to remain
Love the
consistent.
charts. I love the chart.
Yeah, preaching to the choir here. But I put the military-related emissions in a single year next to the maximum amount that Biden's infrastructure bill is expected to reduce emissions based on a Princeton study. And just a sneak preview, it's not even close. With one military budget, Biden offsets any possible, and this is an optimistic study regarding the infrastructure plan. I don't think the infrastructure plan will end up reducing emissions at all, but this was a positive study.
Right.
It was credible, it was produced by Princeton, so it was the only one that showed it making a positive difference, and I wanted to prove a point. There it goes. Several times over, I think 5 times over, that the emissions caused by, Biden's next military budget will offset immediately any progress that will make from the infrastructure bill on reducing emissions. So
you should talk to Elizabeth Warren. Did she want to green the military? That was one of her big...
I was on a call with her. It wasn't just me and her shooting the shit, obviously, but there was a coalition meeting that I was tempted to speak up in. It's so funny, I understand greenifying military installations because there's so fucking many of them. But that's only after I want to nationalize the defense industry and convert it into basically a green economy. That's the only way that greening the military is acceptable.
Military. Yeah.
800 military installations abroad, endless stupid drills. Like, the best way to reduce military related emissions is to have less of
imperialism.
Yes.
I mean,
and there's talented people in the military industrial complex in terms of labor, who may not necessarily be working the defense industry out of choice, but it's because manufacturing jobs are dying, and because armament production is state subsidized, it's been able to weather shocks better than other sectors. We need people assembling parts, able to hydraulic engineers. They should be working in a green economy to save the planet.
Absolutely.
People who know how to use a mop, that one of those industrial mops, without scraping the floor with a metal part in between, which I haven't been able to figure out yet for myself. But there's something for everyone in the green economy.
Yeah.
Don't you remember when the military said the greatest threat to our safety is climate change? I mean, that was an actual. I mean, they were pushing that narrative for a while.
That was like classic U.S. military. How the military. I'm not saying you're wrong or disagreeing with you or anything, but
no, it was a narrative. I'm not disagreeing with that.
So
please.
What? This is like a narrative that the U.S. military has adopted over time, especially as public opinion regarding climate has, the public has clearly demonstrated, an increased amount of giving a shit about the climate over the last decade, no doubt. And in time, the military has talked more and more about climate over that period of time. But there's a quote that I think is important to remember by, I think, like a chief admiral in the Navy or something. It said, the U.S. military's job is to protect the nation. It isn't to save the planet. And what he meant by that is that climate change affects the military's ability to do its job, meaning occupy certain bases to warfighting, basically.
Right.
Climate change poses a threat to warfighting. It increases instability in the host nations that, or the countries that are hosting U.S. military bases, threatening U.S. military personnel. It's not about, the scientifically declared emergency.
Right. It's those sandstorms that are so uncomfortable.
Yeah. So the military is worried about that, and it's, affecting its ability to lose its job. The U.S. military has lost more aircraft to weather-related incidents than it lost during the Vietnam War. I mean, it's just like, it's like more aircraft are destroyed each year by weather than any sort of fighting,
right?
Or because the aircraft crashes because it's shitty. But it's just one of those things where if the military was serious about climate change, it would be arguing, day in, day out, that it needs that at least the industry portion of itself needs to be converted into something else, and that it should shrink, and that it should reduce its overseas footprint to reduce its overall carbon footprint.
Right. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of, I mean, different, but Amy Klobuchar putting out that tweet yesterday or the day before about the police officers in the country who have lost their lives. And it was something like 600 police officers lost their lives
from COVID
in 2021, and 440 of them were from COVID because they won't wear a fucking mask because my freedoms. I mean, it's just so warped. And by choosing a certain part of the narrative to give us a story, you know, unless you dig a little deeper, which most people don't have the time or ability to, you're like, oh, well, the military agrees. It's, you know, if the military is supporting this action and they already said that climate change, I mean, it's like everybody's sort of covering for each other and providing an outlet for people to keep getting scammed. And, That's
not to be too rude on the people that I like, which is Bernie and a couple of the squad members, but they are also providing that cover now, and they need to stop that. They need to fight for us for COVID at least, and fight for foreign policy and push back against the billions going to Ukraine. And I want to see them do that. It's silly that they aren't, because I mean, if I approach my normie Dem family and say, well, we shouldn't be funding this. Well, Bernie's funding this. I mean, that'll shut me at, you know, like,
even Bernie, even Noam Chomsky.
If I am more seen as more extreme than him to a normie centrist Democrat, I have no voice. I'm crazy. I'm a crazy communist or crazy whatever, you know. So we need them to speak up.
Yeah, and I'm under the assumption that, like, at least from what I can tell, it just seems. Just their whole behavior makes it seem like they're afraid to engage in this foreign policy discussion. It's like, look, you know, engaging in a foreign policy discussion, if you're not an expert, it's like going to the car dealership where you're in a position where you feel, you know, unsettled because you're in a position where
you're not the expert and somebody,
there's always going to be someone who knows more than you about a particular topic. But at the end of the day, the leftists should have, and they should use this advantage, is that we always have the burden of proof on our side, because any military spending is a redistribution of wealth from us, the public, you know, elsewhere, mostly to private sector contractors, actually. But the burden of proof, so the insecurity caused by that lack of funds and what it could do otherwise, like COVID funding for ventilation or for vaccines or whatever, for, you know, climate spending, for healthcare, child tax credit, all these sorts of things, the foreign policy expert then has to prove without a doubt that what they're arguing for is more important than that. And oftentimes they really don't, you know, paint compelling visions. But I'm not even seeing that. Like, I'm not even seeing progressive demand.
There's no pushback. No, because you're not allowed to question anything.
They're not making the case for exactly what you're saying. Is what is the alternative $40 billion would do? I mean, that politically that might be played negatively because Ukraine war has been so propagandized to people. We must support this, but and then that's why the squad and other people are not, you know, but the public is sick of these political calculations, though. Like, I think progressives, their biggest supporters see through it. So you're losing your biggest supporters. Is my point. Like, you might be winning over some normie Dems, but
Jen
your normie Dems
loves you.
But those normie Dems aren't going to grow the progressive movement. They're not going to be more in line with progressives because you didn't push back on the billions to Ukraine.
Right. And if everything was taken care of domestically, you know, I'd be open to discussion. I still wouldn't be supportive of the current.
Then I'm all for a long war. Forever wars. No,
but it's, you know, you say that facetiously, but it's like, that's, you know, progressives need to, you know, act like that. You know, they. I mean,
the left is supposed to be anti-war, and in the end, it has to end in peace. At some point, there's going to be a compromise, right? At some point, somebody's going to lose something that mattered a lot to him or her or the country at the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
and no, I understand what you're saying there, and I'm not, you know, I see like a leftist argument for sending weapons to Ukraine. I just don't I just don't think it's possible to be implemented in the way that, you know, these leftists or progressive people are thinking that it'll be effective and reasonable and right in this case. But I can, you know, I'm in favor of, you know, sending, you know, air defense systems to Lebanon to prevent Israel from terrorizing the population every day with, you know, overflights and threatening bombing.
Try to get a vote on that.
Flattening Beirut, you know.
Right. Agreed.
But you know, there's still, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you have to justify it in terms of the domestic cost as well. And there whatever your position is on sending arms, you have to justify it domestically, and you also have to justify it in terms of what is the end game. Our goal is obviously we're anti-war. That's our default setting, and that's what we aspire to. So we can deal with this domestic stuff or not be distracted by this domestic stuff. And I don't see any demand. You know, if I was a squad member, I would have stood up and said those two things. Basically, there's no reason why this aid should be passed before emergency COVID funding, like it was promised. And two, the Biden administration hasn't laid out or hasn't, you know, really suggested that it's interested in resolving the conflict. Right. So I'm not going to support a strategy that does it. Easy.
There you
People
go.
care about other stuff anyway.
Let's get you to Congress.
Oh my God.
Force the strategy. FTS.
Force the strategy.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. What
I'm looking, and it's 6:15, and we only have you till 6 our time. So thank you for hanging out with us extra.
My pleasure. Are you both on the West Coast?
We are. We're in California.
Nice.
Where are you? Where are you?
I'm on East Coast, or Middle East. I'm in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to hear how
Middle East?
Do you want to hear how I say California in an annoying way?
Yes,
I do.
Insult.
It's like kind of I say it as a stereotype towards people in California. California.
Like with a question.
That's stupid.
California.
I'm sorry, that applies to Lila a lot more than me. I'm just gonna say, because I'm Northern California.
More West Coast than you, Pat?
Northern California, we don't talk like that. But
I'm Southern. I'm Southern California. I mean, I'm New York originally, but I've been here now forever.
Really?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a beautiful state, and
yeah, it is. It's good. It's just, I mean, we've got our own problems for sure.
The problem is everyone thinks we're this liberal progressive bastion, and it's awful because we have all it. Yeah. We are the case that should be made to why one more Democrat won't work, because
we have a super majority.
We had a super majority of and we had Medicare for all for the state ready to pass, super majority, and they found one person that they could use as a scapegoat to not bring
Joe Manchin of California.
So
there's always a Joe Manchin or a Joe Lieberman or a fucking parliamentarian. All right, this was so much fun. We didn't even get to half of our wheel. We have so much to talk about. You'll have to come back. Love following you. Stephen Semler, thank you so much for being here with us today. Please check out his work. You really help bring a lot of clarity to me when I'm stumbling through what I'm trying to prove to people. I can always point to one of your graphs. So thank you for breaking it down. That makes me so
happy to hear that. That's exactly what they're for. And thank you both. You guys are such a great time and great Twitter followers. So I was glad to finally enjoy your company, and I feel better off for it and less lonely. So
look at that. We achieved something.
Appreciate everything you've done, and thank you for coming on. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.